So with that, we'd really like to thank our ASL sponsors, RevUp Texas, Alamo City Interpreters, Maritza Herrera, and several other candidates citywide, even knowing for the time that they're giving today for the discussion. And then thank you for joining the partners in the Disability Vote this evening for the Conversation 360 Vote and Disability. This session is being recorded and will be posted to the Disability SA website, its YouTube channel, and social media platforms following tonight's conversation. We're here with candidates running for the District 5 City Council race, which will be held on Saturday, May 1st. The deadline to register to vote is Thursday, April 1st. If you do not live in District 5 and would like to move to a different room, please select the leave room option and volunteers in the main room will assist you. So we're going to begin with some pre-submitted questions and then entertain questions from the floor if time allows. For this district, we anticipate being able to get through about 11 to 12 questions. I'd like to remind the candidates at the forum guidelines that were emailed in advance and really emphasize that the responses directed at other candidates or in reference to other candidates will not be tolerated. You will receive a courtesy warning from me. And if I have to correct you again, I will remove you from the room. Now that the serious stuff is over, we can dive into the questions. Okay, so question number one is for Ms. Barron. Currently, a lack of disability data impacts the ability to remove barriers for an equitable quality of life for those living with a disability. How would you work to ensure a disability identifier question is added to all city surveys, applications, and other forms, where other optional demographic questions such as race, ethnicity, age, gender, LGBTQ identity, and income are collected?
I don't think she's here.
She's not here?
No. Irma Baron?
No, she's not present.
Okay. Then I believe that would go to Ms. Castillo. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please. Sorry, I turned off my camera instead of the mic on.
No, absolutely. Okay, so the question is, currently there's a lack of disability data that impacts the ability to remove barriers for an equitable quality of life for those living with a disability. How would you work to ensure that a disability identifier question is added to all city surveys, applications, and other forms where other optional demographic questions such as race and ethnicity, age, gender, LGBTQ identity, and income are collected?
Yeah, I believe that the city of San Antonio needs to put forward a quality of life study to examine what are the best solutions. And I think it's important not only to propose the study and gather the data, but to act on the policy proposals, because often what we see is the studies are done and then they're shelved. So we need to be sure that, it's the disabled community leading the conversation on what that study should entail, and then also leading the policymaking process once the quality of life study is completed.
Excellent. Thank you. Now I believe that Ms. Crabb, you have the opportunity to follow up.
Well, simple. I would request that the public affairs director and the new government who's in charge of it include a disability demographic on all materials so that we can collect that information, same as we collect other information.
Thank you. Mr. Garza?
Yes. Well, first of all, I will not make the question optional. We would put it on there to be answered. If we have an abundance of answers that point to a need of a disability, we will go in that direction. We'll address that, but we will not make it optional. We would make it a question to be answered that we deal with.
Thank you. Mr. Gress?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is I would ask to write a council consideration request into how the communication plan takes into consideration the disability community, and I would then request an ability question be added as a standard form of practice. Since I do have a daughter with disabilities, it's very important. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Landon?
Absolutely. I think it's important that we make sure that aside from just having a disclaimer at the end of all of these city policies and forms, that we're also taking into account that we can make something as simple as a change to those documents and forms. So I would make sure that we can find a way working with the city manager to implement those changes to the city forms as soon as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Mata.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for being late. Yeah, I would make it simple. I would just mandate that we add them to all city forms, that we add that question to all city forms. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Moreno?
Yes, ma'am. So obviously in the time of COVID, we've been utilizing a lot of these surveys, even with Google Forms, especially. You've probably been noticing a lot of that. And to me, it would just be kind of imparting that information to our city manager, as we referred to earlier, and getting him to make sure with his cabinet and staff and get that situated so we can have that proper documentation. So that might include the public information officer and the IT team, just to get that situated, because it's a very simple thing to do. And then the data is in time data, and we can collect it and be able to utilize it for what we need to do in order to support all our citizens.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Yanes.
Yes, I would support a proposal or initiate the proposal. I think it's very important. That information is, it's like knowing is half the battle. We have to figure out who would be recognized as disabled. That should be common as if asking if you served in the military. So I would support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now be moving over to the next question. This will be initially directed to Ms. Crabb. And that question is, what steps can we take so that every building and sidewalk is wheelchair accessible? Please share your vision or plan for moving San Antonio toward a day wherein every building and sidewalk are accessible to those using mobility devices to get around our community.
Well, I think what would be most appropriate is we handle it by district and charge each district representative with collecting the information on what needs to be made accessible. And it's going to take a little bit of time to do it that way, but that's what we, hire our city workers for, is collecting that data. I mean, they hire thousands of census workers to do such a massive job. And if we're just in charge of each district, I think we can accomplish that. And then once we have that information per district, then we can put it all together in a cumulative plan and then make a bigger plan of action.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garza.
Yes, the first thing I would do is I would wait for a call from a constituent. If a constituent calls me and says, look, I'm in a wheelchair and my sidewalks are all broken up, what I would do, I would go there the very next day or later that same day and turn in a work order to the city to get that fixed. And being a veteran, I propose to use the grenade effect. We go in to fix that one, we're gonna fix the one around it. They're all gonna get fixed one by one, but I will answer to my constituents. If my constituent needs a sidewalk because he can't run his wheelchair, I will put a sidewalk for him, and by the grenade effect, fix the ones around him and go forward and make sure that this is one of the ways that we service our constituents and move away from the institutional neglect that District 5 has been receiving.
Thank you. Mr. Gress.
As a District 5, I mean, we have to demand that we implement the sidewalk accessibility plan and a timeline when we can expect the city to be fully accessible. I mean, and when you're at city council meetings, you just, it's not in the budget, it's not going to be sufficient anymore. We need a plan of action, and we need to start, we simply cannot be ADA out of compliance anymore. I mean, because in District 5, if you walk it, whether what part of the district you're in 5, a lot of us have lived here, for decades, at least for me. And some of the sidewalks are broken, and you can't walk on them, whether you're just walking on it or not. I mean, you're going to trip and fall, they're not finished, or it's kind of wild that it's only one side of the street that has a sidewalk. So we need to be more accountable as a District 5 representative and start getting to work implementing it.
Thank you. Mr. Landon?
Absolutely. I think we need to first go back and look and see where folks have already reported a lot of this. I know this is one of those issues that can be brought up on the 311 app. So I'm sure that not every single issue that has been posted in there has been taken care of. So we need to go back and look at that and see if we can address some of the things that people have reported already. And I know that I've read in the past that previous council members have done surveys of the neighborhoods to gauge the scores of walkability and of areas that are actually wheelchair accessible. And we need to go back and use that data and actually start to address those concerns. I know even just next to my own house, there's no sidewalk, and there's a lady that walks by every single day with a cane and an umbrella. And you know, it's as simple as addressing the needs that we see even more immediately, and make sure going forward that we continue to take those issues seriously. And then the other thing is, as the bond comes back up, I know we just had one pass in 2017, but as the bond comes back, I think we need to fight to make sure that there's equity budgeting inside the bonds as well, not just at the city budget level, and make sure that we use that equity lens to address many of these disparities for folks that are really expecting changes to this infrastructure here in District 5.
Thank you. Mr. Mata.
Yeah, well, you know, definitely look into adding the accessibility to any new infrastructure improvements and making sure that that's a priority. And of course the data. I mean, like everyone there, well, the ones I mentioned there about the data, that's very important. But anything new infrastructure-wise, any new developments, want to make sure that that's included in there. So that's where I would start. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno.
Sure. So in looking at it, obviously there is going to be some assessment in terms of evaluation of what is needed. And I'm sure there are already some studies, as were noted earlier, that we can build off of. What's really imperative upon us and incumbent upon us as potential leaders in this District 5 is that we have to leverage our ability to communicate that to the other areas, because they're going to be fighting for their areas and advocating that, hey, we need stuff over here. And that's really where the situation is. In city council, there's a team of 8, including the city manager's a team of 11. So you're really looking at how am I going to leverage, you know, my constituents' needs with that of the others, and how am I going to show support that, hey, this is what we need, and this is how it can be fairly equitable to close those disparity gaps. Because a lot of times it's not really, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Because if you're that rogue member on that team, you're going to get nothing done for your constituents. And it's really important for you guys to be able to ally with the other groups of individuals in order to do what's prioritized for your community. And that's really how we have to leverage our skills. And not only that, but reaching out to the public and the private sector and finding ways to be innovative and putting that on the cabinet and the city manager's lap, and finding ways to find other monies than others than just bonds, perhaps creating an outlet to these private businesses or these public businesses in ways that we can create the feasibility of providing these sidewalks and these paved roads and these bike trails, because it's as everybody knows, it's a very concerning and alarming situation where we still have students and people walking to their appointments or school literally in the mud or waiting at the bus stop for something, you know, based on that. So that's how I think we would do, is leverage our skills.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yanez.
Yes, hello. I think the issue is, you know, it's provide equity. That's the policy making of a council person. We need to find new ways to solve the needs of the constituents, and that includes the disabled. As we build new infrastructure, we have to include them. The needs of the disabled. Is the accessway passable for them? Are they recognized? Can it work? That has to be included. So they want to be a part of the process. Let's not forget them. So I would work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be directed to Mr. Garza first.
I didn't get to answer the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Ms. Castillo. Yes, sorry.
Ultimately, what it comes down to is funding, right? We need to ensure that we're adequately funding public works. And right now, you know, on the May ballot, we're also going to be voting on a charter amendment that's going to ask voters if we're going to use infrastructure bond money for housing. That's already a very small bucket for such large needs. Rather, throughout the district, like every other block needs work. Our mothers can't push a stroller, folks can't go down the sidewalk in their wheelchairs because there's a CPS pool in the center. And there's just not enough allowance for folks with disabilities to safely commute on our streets, on our sidewalks rather. So what it comes down to is ensuring that we have adequate funding for infrastructure, and that, you know, when a project receives public money, because when we look at the map on One Stop for the city of San Antonio, we see that a lot of our sidewalks are going near newer developments. So we need to look at implementing a community benefits agreement. So in that way, if a project is receiving public money, that they have to give something back for public good, right? And that could be that they provide sidewalks rather than using our city money to, you know, beautify an area when the far west side and the far south side have been neglected. So we need to be sure that if they're using our public money and they're not paying any taxes, that they need to give community something back. But ultimately, it comes down to ensuring that we're putting money where it's needed the most, which is infrastructure.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Garza.
Yes.
What can we do so that there are healthier food choices in our stores and restaurants? And can we open restaurants with healthier choices? The obese rate here in the West Side is high. Please share what policies, programs, or incentives you would put forward to ensure that there are healthier food choices available at our local restaurants.
Well, first of all, we would get the city health organization, whatever that is, to put up a standard sign on all restaurants to disclose the calories and the ingredients of the foods. And we must choose the food that has the less cholesterol, less fat, and more vegetables, and you know, that has a good for the body foods. You know, we just have to make it a standardized on all restaurants, especially on District 5, that we will have menus that project good eating habits. And that's what I would do. I would make it a standardized requirement for all restaurants, especially the littlest ones to the biggest ones. We would have that available on the menus and on the walls.
Thank you. Mr. Gress.
I mean, of course, we need to bring in different places to eat. I mean, more advertiser, healthier food programs, but the key would be bringing in different restaurants, more businesses, different type of businesses. Since I am a small business owner, the rate of the small business here, let's get real, it's all Mexican food, but the people that have Mexican restaurants here want a different type of food brought into the district, whether it be sandwich shops, coffee shops, something that is more healthier, Panera Breads. They want all these restaurants. Why? So that they don't have to go across town, north side, south side, to get these healthier choices. People want these healthier choices in District 5. And the only way to do this is to help small businesses grow and bring in better businesses here, but incentivizing also them to not just give the big businesses tax abatement, but also incentivize them, but to bring business to use that money to put back into District 5. So that's what I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of the restaurants around here in District 5 don't necessarily not have the foods, the fresh produce. Many of them do have much of the fresh produce. They have a lot of the ingredients that you would need to have healthy food options. It's just repairing things together, right? Instead of, you know, maybe a plate of pork chops and eggs and potatoes and beans, you know, all of the ingredients that we see go into things like salsa and pico de gallo and all of those types of things, those are healthy ingredients. And even the ingredients that I just mentioned, the pork chops, the eggs, all those things, they're healthy in moderation. It just depends on how, you know, on the amount of consumption. So I think even if we could convince or encourage restaurants to offer smaller portions for certain menu items, that would definitely help. If we could ask them to even look at the option of bringing down the carb intake. So a lot of our intake here is carb heavy. It's the beans, the potatoes, the tortillas, you know, all of those types of things. And the other thing is we are actually the hub for produce for the whole city. The produce terminal here in 78207 is the place that really provides most of the produce for restaurants all throughout the city, including those in District 5. I think we really need to tap into the produce terminal and offer something similar to the District 3 program that's available, that, you know, you can get produce at local convenience stores, right? We have so many of those. I think offering other alternatives for folks to get food from different places is definitely important too. I think that's some of the ideas I'd had around that specifically.
Mr. Mata.
Yes, well, thank you for asking that question. You know, with the pandemic, you know, many people have forgotten that we have local epidemics, which are childhood obesity and childhood diabetes. So, you know, to answer your question, you know, I would definitely want to get together with as many restaurants as possible, start an initiative where we're looking to provide or serve healthier foods and get everybody on board with that. But also investing in local youth programs to educate some of their participants. I think it's another way of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moreno?
Yeah, so this is something that obviously is tackled within the education avenue and bringing awareness and understanding. Ideally, we'd love to be a better kind of having a better makeup of our plate that is aligned to all food groups. But unfortunately, you know, we have very great food that tastes wonderful, especially here in the South Side and the West Side of District 5. And so we're accustomed to that. And that's one thing that people are kind of hesitant towards, is they see that, but then also we see the struggle, as was alluded to. A lot of times people feel that the fresh food is more expensive than just getting something processed. It's $1 at McDonald's. I mean, we do this with our kids. We provide them with fresh produce every day to take home. On the weekends, they have extended stuff for Fridays through Sundays to have, and they leave it there. They take the chips and the cookies. They don't take the fresh produce. So it's really about educating our communities and knowing that you can utilize this and it's okay. A lot of times our people are prideful and they're saying, I don't really want a handout. I'm not going to take this from you because I can do it myself. And that's another aspect that we have to address is, you know, we have a very prideful community where they see handouts and support as like a weakness, and it's not. And it's really important for us to address those concerns, because it's okay to get the support as long as you're using it as a way to get to the next step. And when it comes to restaurants, I know it's tough because you're competing with these large corporations that are able to provide and produce at a smaller level. But the idea is let's find ways to encourage more, not just that it's just a hub, but let's create produce stores. I mean, all I see is Chuchu's on pretty much Laredo Street is the closest one that I can find here within the middle of the South Side and the West Side of District 5. And that's something that's a problem. I know the idea perhaps of bringing up produce within the convenience stores, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yanez.
Well, I'm looking at this approach a little differently. It's, you know, I always want people to have the information to understand that there's a problem. Somehow, maybe we can have free body mass index testing or diabetes testing. Folks need to know the problem existing now rather than later when it becomes too late. You know, also, we haven't really promoted a farmer's market in San Antonio. Somehow we have to bring that collective thought to say, hey, this is part of our social system, but let's reinforce it and support it. And that will change the attitude. We love, you know, I love my breakfast in the morning on different restaurants, and I don't want to give that up, but I will have to watch myself weight accordingly if we start getting a little bigger. But I think folks need to be aware that there is some testing so they can realize that there is a problem. I don't think they see there as a problem. We see it as, you know, the big strides, but for the individual, the constituent we're trying to serve, we got to let them know. But make it in a pleasant way. Hey, we got to get your BMI testing and a free diabetes testing. You got to know it. And maybe there's an incentive. Maybe you'll get you'll win a gift certificate for HEB for good health purchases, something like that. Just let the constituent know that there is a concern and we're trying to solve it in a positive way. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Castillo.
Can you restate the question, please?
Absolutely. The question was, what can we do so that there are healthier food choices in our stores and restaurants? And can we open restaurants with healthier choices? The obese rate here in the West Side is high. Please share what policies, programs, or incentives you would put forward to ensure there are healthier food choices available at our local restaurants.
When we talk about obesity and health disparities, we need to look at poverty, right? Poverty is often the root cause of these health inequities. So until we tackle poverty, avenues that we can explore till we get there is looking at implementing community gardens. Within District 5, there are a lot of vacant city-owned lots that we can activate to create community gardens or whatever the neighboring communities want to see there to grow fresh fruit. There's also opportunities to partner with the ISDs within our boundaries. For example, at Rodriguez Elementary, they met with community and asked, would y'all like to see a community garden? In the north side of town, we see a community garden, and the school even has chickens, and the kids get to take home like these fresh eggs. That's organic, and you know that's really expensive if you go to Central Market. And if we could bring that into the communities and make it accessible to our kids and families, that would make all the difference. But again, you know, activating our green spaces, tackling poverty, and ensuring that we're partnering with existing school districts.
Thank you. Ms. Crabb.
So I think that we need to more heavily advertise our healthy food programs that are currently existing and expand the Healthy Corner Store initiative. We can also look at proactively attracting restaurants that serve healthier options to offer more variety. And I would like to find ways to encourage more pop-up farmer markets. And another thing to take into consideration, where there is food scarcity, we have to look at the price of food. So if you're having to feed a family on very little, then you're probably going to choose a less expensive option. So we have to ensure that those options look the same price-wise for families.
Thank you very much. The next question is going to be directed to Mr. Gress. And it is, employment is difficult to obtain. What jobs are available to disabled and non-disabled people, and why are jobs hard to get right now? With 13.2% of San Antonians living with a disability, I'd like to hear from each of you your thoughts on some targeted efforts you would put into place to ensure there is equitable access to the workforce development programs that are helping to elevate the education and skill sets of our residents for greater levels of employment.
Okay, well, I mean, working with Workforce Alamo Solutions to make sure that the job fairs are accessible, as well as working with Economic Development Department to ensure all programs are expanded. But to go a little bit further, like I mentioned, I use my daughter a lot because she has disabilities. Yes, jobs are low right now, but it's hard for my daughter to get a job due to the fact that certain job qualifications that you do need in certain places, she doesn't currently have. But with that said, there are opportunities there. We just need to open up more businesses to show them how beneficial everyone is. And like my daughter, for instance, you know, she can, you give her a task, repetitious task, she can do it every single day. The only thing is getting her there, mobility issues. Now, with that said, there's we're in the other forum the other day. I've been in the buses with my daughter. The sad part about it is, which bus driver are you going to get? Are you going to get the race car driver bus guy, or are you going to get the safety car bus driver guy? By the time my daughter gets there, she's so distraught and doesn't want to do it anymore. There's opportunities there. I mean, there's data there. We need to include that in. It's just like, we need to do a lot more. I mean, this is just a very touchy subject for me. Sorry.
No, thank you for sharing. Mr. Landon.
Absolutely. So would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. The question is that employment is difficult to obtain. What jobs are available to disabled and non-disabled people? And why are jobs hard to get right now? With 13.2% of San Antonians living with a disability, I'd like to hear from each of you your thoughts on some targeted efforts you would put into place to ensure there is equitable access to the workforce development programs that are helping to elevate the education and skill sets of our residents for greater levels of employment.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of facets to that question, but definitely making sure that well, to begin with, what jobs are available to disabled and non-disabled. The truth is, right now there are not a ton of jobs available to just about anyone. We're starting to pick back up, and jobs are starting to come back into place. But to begin with, it's difficult for folks to get jobs right now. So I really think, hitting on what you just mentioned with the workforce development, we really need to find a way to make sure that we're utilizing those dollars, the 1/8 of a cent sales tax that has been allocated to workforce development, to make sure that we're addressing issues of joblessness, and to make sure that we're able to accommodate folks, not only in the program, in the workforce development program, but in the jobs that come after, in the jobs that that they're in these training programs for. To tell you the truth, I don't know that I could just guess on what all jobs are available to disabled folks. And I would assume that because that's not, it's a umbrella term, there's got to be so many different disabilities that we'd have to find that we'd have to make sure are being accommodated. So I don't know that I can answer specifically which jobs are available, but it's making sure that we are making the accommodations for folks, no matter what those disabilities might be, that we're making sure that the UDC is followed throughout all of the companies that we're partnering with. And if issues do come up, we go to the IGR committee and make sure that those things are heard and resolved in those moments. So
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mata.
All right, thank you, Franz, asking that question. And I do want to thank Mr. Gress for sharing that information he did about his daughter. My daughter also suffers with a disability. It's more of a mental disability. Started when she was 9 years old, and that's why the disability issue in general is real close to me. She's 21 years now, 21 years old now, and she's in college. But she's overcame a lot of adversity with her mental disability. But I do want to tell you that we do need to partner with companies that can hire individuals that have disabilities. Amazon right now has a good program in place. They're hiring individuals who are disabled at $15 an hour with benefits, and they're some part-time and I think close to full-time. So it's a pretty good job. My daughter is participating in that, and I think it's a very good position for her to be in, and it's helped her a lot. It's given her a sense of worth. Because she's in school and everything, but she also has this job that is working with her, and of course it's a mental disability, not a physical disability, but working with companies like that and partnering with companies like that, I think might be one of the ways to address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno. I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Moreno.
Okay. Thank you. So going straight ahead, I mean, there's obviously many variables when it comes to mental and physical disabilities for our community members, and it's a vital and important thing to address when it comes to the dynamics of our economy. A lot of it is centered on tourism. I know with this workforce development, that idea, to me, it's really more centered on, what have we done to prepare them from the local ISDs, whether it's the South Sands, the Harlandales, the Edgewoods, or SAISD. I know we have a lot of partnerships in place with nonprofits and other groups such as Goodwill and Salvation Army to prepare some of our kids, especially the life skills and functional kids, in terms of getting them the work experience and the accessibility to be self-sufficient for themselves and to be able to find ways to be invested in a potential job. And that's something that we need to broker with these local businesses, public and private, and finding ways to give them these type of incentives to continue to do outreach for these skill sets of learners and to find ways to bridge those gaps. Additionally, I know we have other issues in terms of students with mental wellness, history and issues. And those are things that, each of them leave with a transition plan. And some of our kids can actually, depending on their disability, can stay there till almost 21. And we're finding ways to transition them to be able to provide for themselves at some point, or at least live on their own in a least restrictive environment. So it's definitely working with our local partners and our nonprofits and finding ways to expand that and enrich that, because it's really the partnerships that are going to be able to assist this idea of providing jobs for our disabled community, especially our people with disabilities that are developmentally delayed or things of that nature. Physically, I think we have a lot of options that we can definitely do for our community and do a much better job for it.
Thank you. Mr. Yanez.
Yes, thank you. What I'd like to see is, I'd like to see, let's say, workforce training create a program that offered disability understanding training. The candidate Anthony mentioned that, you know, his daughter, what bus driver was she going to get? So, you know, we have to be able to accommodate folks. Not everyone understands the issues and concerns that surround a disabled person. There's a lot of factors, but they need that extra patience and time. I'd like to see, you know, each business, we have, you said it's 13.2% of San Antonians have a disability. Well, if our corporations and our businesses, nonprofits, and anyone that contracts with the city, we should say, you must take this, send your assistant manager or someone to disability understanding training to understand that their needs. Now that you have recognized their needs, I'd like you to make room for them, make room for, create a job, expand some job or shorten a job, but make room so we can hire these folks to get them a part of society. We can't just leave them behind and say they're not welcome at all types of jobs. I think all our businesses should welcome and make room, a certain percentage if possible, to say, hey, they're San Antonians, so let's make room and get them a job, because getting that exposure will help them and help everyone. So we have to have a better understanding. That's what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Castillo.
I believe that we need to work towards reducing the barriers for folks with disabilities when it comes to employment opportunities. When we look at the city of San Antonio, for example, and the jobs that are offered through the city, oftentimes they require driver's license. That's a barrier. There are educational requirements, and that's also seen as a barrier. And I think when it comes to workforce development, we need to ensure that during these conversations, that the disability community is included in the process, right? This shouldn't be a conversation that we're having after the fact. We need to be sure that when we're in the policymaking process, that the disability community is included. And when we look at the Ready Work committee with the city, is someone within the disability community on that committee? You know, if not, that's a problem, because, you know, we need to make sure everyone's included in the process and not just being addressed, you know, at the end when something's passed. Let's now go to the disability community. It shouldn't be that way.
Thank you. Ms. Crabb.
So the first step, I would like to make sure that our job fairs are accessible, and also work with the economic development departments to ensure that all programs are expanded to include our disability community. I would also personally employ some of the same initiatives that I worked under in the Office of Civil Rights at the State Department. We were charged with ensuring that equal employment opportunities were applied across the board. So providing support also for our employee affinity groups, which included a disability affinity group. And it allowed for us to ensure that equal application was provided. So this tells me a lot about culture. So I would set the example by enacting those opportunities and practices in the District 5 office. And I would hope that it would be a self-perpetuating cycle, that our disability community would provide the city a more well-rounded perspective in regards to how we can further accommodate the rest of the city in regards to our disability.
Thank you. Mr. Garza.
Yes, we're back to basic constituents. I would make an assessment of the disability people that are disabled in District 5, and we went into the places where disabled people work right now. Lighthouse for the Blind, Goodwill, Salvation Army, wherever they work, we would incentivize them with funds from the available for infrastructure to get the constituents after assessment who is disabled in District 5 and get them a job. And we would incentivize where there are disability jobs already. They are there. All they need to do is get some positions open. Any new company that comes into San Antonio must have 25 or maybe 30 or 15, some positions available for people with disabilities. And we would take care of the constituent matters in District 5. Right now, they're totally neglected.
Thank you very much. So the next question is going to be directed to, sorry, just a moment. It's going to be directed to Mr. Landon. And that question is, what is being done about the violence in our communities and the lack of education in this district? Highlight for us how you would work to reduce the level of violence in our district and address the lack of educational resources available.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of this starts, a lot of the issues that come down to violence within the communities starts not only within our households, but in our schools. And I think we need to make sure that on a base level that the education that our students are getting in the environment in which that they're in is supportive of making sure that, you know, we are addressing some of those issues that are causing violence. A lot of things that we see are caused by, you know, either trauma or things that are happening at home. And as kids grow, you know, their issues come up, and that's where we see some of these pockets of violence within the community. But also it's educating, it's making sure that we're consistently watching those issues. It's making sure that we have, you know, a lot of folks within the communities have asked for safe officers, have asked for an increase in those types of patrolling, because they're community-oriented officers that communities see as being folks who are integrated and know these communities, know the neighborhood associations. So we need to make sure we're also supportive of those folks, that personnel, and make sure that we're asking the neighborhoods what issues they see surrounding violence in the communities. I don't remember the second part of your question. I think it was education.
Yes, the second part of the question what had to do with highlight for us how you would work to reduce the level of violence in our district and address the lack of educational resources available.
Educational resources. Yeah. So I think, you know, there's a lot of conversations around cite and release. There's lots of conversations around, you know, making sure that we're educating folks on what their rights are when they do come up to issues around violence and petty crimes. And I think that it's making sure that folks know, that kids know, that you know, even adults know that the issues that are coming up, what types of rights that they have as citizens, and also how those things can affect them long term as well. I think we would make sure we were.
Mr. Mata.
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you for asking that question. You know, I read a study, and I believe that it's indicating that San Antonio is number 2 right now when it comes to violent crime. So San Antonio has always had very high crime and very high violence. You know, I would, much like the homeless population, you know, work with trying to address their issues with counseling. Because, you know, just as Mr. Landon had indicated there, some of this stuff is because of PTSD, you know, and we need to address that. I mean, that leads to self-medicating with drugs and other negative aspects that may happen. So I believe offering counseling and doing a lot of outreach could be one of the ways. As far as education, partnering with the school districts and spreading the word through forums, and partnering with the community, with neighborhood associations. But yeah, definitely we need to address the core issues of why people tend to get violent and why they get into drug use and everything else. And a lot of it is PTSD. So I would start there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno.
And if you can, Joyce, would you mind repeating the question just so I can have it clearly?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. So the question was, what is being done about the violence in our communities and the lack of education in this district? Highlight for us how you would work to reduce the level of violence in our district and address the lack of educational resources available.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to this situation, it's a very delicate matter when it includes domestic violence or just, trauma-infused violence that we're seeing. We know that a lot of times our communities are made up of this trauma that they've been holding and they've been having to manifest within them, and it's created a lot of issues. I know our city lacks resources in providing that to them. A lot of times our ISDs are the ones having to shoulder a lot of that burden. And to me, I feel it's important for us to work together collectively. And that's something that I've been kind of sharing throughout is, we have these systems in place to support what social workers, community and schools, counselors, myself as an assistant principal, I work with kids that are dealing with, trauma, that are living at residential treatment centers, that are constantly, they're fighting, they're beating us up, and it's tough. And I know it's hard to see that in a 12 or 13-year-old student and seeing, that anger and that blank space where they go somewhere else. It's difficult to rationalize it because then 10 minutes later, they're the most happy-go-lucky person. But the idea is working with him and finding ways and solutions to it. I think brokering our abilities together is going to help. One thing I'm looking at when it comes to awareness and policing, I know people want a police presence, not necessarily extreme policing. They want, people that have the skills to provide the services. One thing I've been considering is why don't we incentivize by creating stipends for personnel that are trained, such as social workers that become police officers, provide another outlet for them to get an additional pay on their stipend for becoming those type of resource officers. There's different things that we can do to support that, but it does start with educating them at the foundation and working with that and getting all hands on deck, because it's not a simple answer. It's very difficult. And when you work with students and you work with adults, it's two different things. So students will be able to relent. Adults sometimes have weapons, sometimes have other, things that they're bringing to the table that creates a bigger situation. So that's something we must handle with delicate care.
Thank you. Mr. Yanez?
Yes, the answer, or my recommendation is jobs. We have to have job creation. New industries have to come in here. We're kind of a post-manufacturing town. We're not exactly a super cybersecurity site yet. We're trying to develop that, but we must have jobs. Give these folks a way to earn a living, and some of those problems will subside. Others will deal with them as much as possible, but I think it's job creation. That would be the best answer. In education, if you want these jobs, you have to work towards this education, workforce training. We can help guide folks to get those jobs, but that's the way I see it to solve this big problem. It's very tough. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Castillo.
I believe it's important that we need to invest in our communities and people. And what that looks like is investing in youth and senior centers, being out in the community. Some folks are like, oh, over here's a pocket of where folks always do illegal stuff and their children. I'm like, where's the nearest park or recreational center? I don't know. So we need to be sure that there's stuff for our communities and our kids to be doing and have access to. And I also believe that we need to destigmatize folks with criminal records, right? I commend Anthony Gress for hiring folks who have been formerly incarcerated, because when you have that on your record, it's very dehumanizing. And a lot of folks, they go back to the system because one, no one wants to hire them. And it's just the system. This is a very loaded question. It's this system. So we need to be sure that we're providing work opportunities for folks with records. And, we need to ensure that we pass the cite and release ordinance and that we add additional things onto that. For example, graffiti needs to be added to the cite and release ordinance because we have 17-year-olds getting felonies because of tagging, and that's just going to cause problems in their future, and we shouldn't be doing that to our youth in our community. And we need to invest in us and ensure that there's community centers, youth centers, and there's safe places for our community to go for recreational purposes.
Thank you. Ms. Crabb.
So to be clear, there's crime and then there's violence, and those can be one and the same, but those are also two completely different choices. So I think we need to focus on the victims, and we have to provide basic safety for our community. And district residents have told me time and time again that they want more police presence, and I would certainly make a special request that this be accommodated through the police department. I want to participate in block walks with our police so that our officers are becoming part of the community and our residents feel like they can reach out for help, because a lot of people are scared to say anything for fear of retribution. And so they just let it go. And also violence can stem from many things. There's there's not a necessary answer to solve that puzzle, but it is a choice. And I think we need to address inopportunity and work towards a more healthy, well-rounded society just in regards to that. I also think we need to start proactively making our recently released members of Bexar County part of the society again, once they've paid their time, and not continue to ignore them as individuals.
Thank you. Mr. Garza.
Yes. First of all, for my constituents, the first thing that I would do is I would put a police substation between Zarzamora, Brazos Streets, and Guadalupe Street. Once that is situated there, everything will start calming down. As homes get rehabilitated, businesses will come in. Just imagine in your mind Guadalupe Street between Zarzamora and Brazos being the market, a marketplace where tourists come from all over the world to visit there because it's safe. Right now, people don't even dare go there. Every day, I see it. What's wrong with putting the police station right there? And then everything will start selling out. The next thing that we need is a number, 511 or 711 or some number where we can anonymously make a call that right now there's a bad thing going on over here. There's a fight, there's a shooting, there's a drug deal coming down. We have to fix that. But, we have to start, everything is unprecedented now. And what I will do is put a substation right there on Guadalupe Street between Zarzamora and Brazos. And that will fan out, small businesses will come in, and that's where the tourists will start to come in. And the District 5 will start rebuilding and will come to life because it will bring businesses and people will take pride in their country. And we start educating the people around there. Believe me, they are ready to move on to the future. And that's what we are doing here for the next generation following us.
Thank you. Mr. Gress.
Okay, well, what's being done about the violence in our community is not enough. I mean, if you live in District 5, it's a constant battle. There's always the need for more patrol officers here in the area. We do need to tackle that first off. It can be anywhere from domestic violence, abuse, child abuse, anything. I mean, across the street, it just happened for me last night in my neighborhood. We also do need more community investment by doing this education-wise and educating the community what is going to happen, what needs to happen, how they need to proceed. The second part of the question would be to reduce level of violence in our district. Well, basically basic necessities and just increase more patrols, like I said earlier. But we do need to educate everyone. We also need officers that we hire that work the area to also understand and empathize with the people here that are elderly, don't speak the language. It's a language barrier. And also, like Terry said, I do hire felons. Just because they look different doesn't mean that they are different. They're getting reacclimated into society. I mean, I have body art, if you can tell. So, I mean, and I'm a big guy. If I'm walking around at night, I do get pulled over or I ask, where am I going? Maybe because I don't look a certain way, but this is the neighborhood. This is the area we're in. We have a lot of work to do as a District 5 councilman, whichever one of us gets hired in, due to the fact that, I mean, it's going to be a hard job and nothing's been done in the last 40 years to address any of the issues that we're all talking about today. It could be substations, it could be police patrols, it can be investment in the community. I mean, the root of the matter is that all of us are trying to do the same thing, trying to better District 5, the district that we live in.
Thank you. So the next question is going to be directed to Mr. Mata. Is transportation safe, including via trans and et cetera? Can you talk to us about where you see opportunities to improve city oversight of local transportation options to ensure the increased safety of the riders?
Sure. We need to invest in more public transportation, but we need to have a lot of oversight. So I would start with committees, making sure we have a committee that can oversee that and see if there's any complaints when it comes to that and start to rectify them. So I would do it through committee and making sure that we have enough investment in public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question is going to go to Mr. Moreno. I'm sorry, the question is going to Mr. Moreno. Excuse me. Sorry.
Is it the same question? Would you mind repeating it?
It is. Yes, okay. I'll repeat it. I apologize for tripping over my tongue. It's late. Okay, so is transportation safe, such as VIA and the VIA Trans, etc.? Talk to us about where you see opportunities to improve city oversight of local transportation options to ensure the increased safety of the riders.
Sure. So I do believe it is safe. As mentioned, infrastructure needs to improve in order to provide a safe and easy route for our community members. I know some routes have been rerouted and modified in order to fit the certain pandemic situation. When it comes to oversight, ideally, I've been able to visit many places throughout the world, and I see how mass transit is supportive of it invigorating a community. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to be there yet because it hasn't passed when it comes to these, monorails or things that are going to be centered towards downtown, similar to Austin. But the idea would be just to create ways to make it easier for people to travel. And that's the idea, because there are things that cause concerns and cause issues when it comes to getting reliable and affordable transportation to appointments, to jobs, to interviews, to pick up your students and kids. There's a lot of things that we need to kind of address in providing that, but it would be important to engage the community and provide those stakeholders with the opportunity to express their concerns and also address the things that we're doing correctly. That way we can kind of build off of that as well and see where we can take from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yanez.
I've taken the bus many times here in other cities, and part of it, what I see is sometimes, there's it's not enough light or the message is not available to read. I always thought, how come we don't have solar panels to provide additional lighting for the riders while they're waiting? Somehow the little areas don't seem to be safe. Sometimes I wouldn't stand right in the middle, I'd stand on the side. I just think we can do little incremental ideas like that just to make it more welcoming. So that's a suggestion I would have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Castillo.
Yeah, when we talk about public transportation in San Antonio, for example, with VIA in particular, there are only 2 slots available for folks on wheelchairs. And if those 2 slots are full and there's someone else at a bus stop in a wheelchair, the bus has to pass them. So we need to be sure that when VIA is looking into purchasing new buses, that it includes more slots for wheelchairs to be attached. We have room for bicycles in and outside of the bus, but we need to be sure that no one gets left at the bus stop because the only 2 slots are full. In addition to that, we need to be sure that we're keeping up with infrastructure. I was speaking to a family that when it floods and the VIA Trans picks up her daughter, that if it's raining, it's tricky and there's like nowhere where her daughter could get on safely onto the bus. If anything, if it's raining, they have to go like further down the block to make sure that the ramp can go down for her to get on. So we need to be sure that, we're investing in infrastructure and that we're having a conversation with VIA on how can we improve ridership for folks with disabilities.
Thank you. Ms. Crabb?
So I think that the opportunity lies with our Public Works Department and CPS. And as the council representative, we need to apply the appropriate amount of pressure to ensure that the bus stops are well lit and visible and ensure that there aren't overgrown bushes and trees at the bus stops. My sister was waiting for the bus about 7 months ago, and a man who was standing next to bushes exposed himself to her while she was waiting. So that could have easily not been the case had there not been way overgrown bushes right next to the bus stop. And I also think we can start to look at putting phones that connect straight to the police department at the bus stop.
Thank you. Mr. Garza.
Yes, the solution really is not that hard. District 5 will be divided into sectors. Each sector would have 2 vans available, driven by the people that live in that sector. And the riders would call them, and there would be 2, because in case one can't make it, there's another one available. Nobody would be stranded. Can you imagine having to walk to go get the bus? Can you imagine waiting for the VIA bus that's 30 minutes late or never gets there, or they're just not, you know, it makes everybody late to get to the doctor's office or whatever. But if we have sectors with people that live in that sector, with vans that have been provided by the city or cost shared, they would be there and they would know the constituents that need a ride, when they need it, how they need it. And then we could get vouchers from VIA, and we could keep those vans running. They need an oil change, we go to the city. They need any repairs, they go to the city. It's a new idea. It's gonna blow everybody's mind out. But if you divide it by sectors, and people that live in this sector are provided the vans, cost shared, and they take care of the people that need a ride. It's the constituents. We're back down to the constituents. We wanna make sure that we take care of the constituents.
Thank you. Mr. Gress.
Well, I mean, I think the opportunity lies with our SAPD department, as well as the Department of Human Services, making sure that the bus stops are lighted. There's a, you know, maybe have a blue phone there so that people can call for any issues. VIA Police works with our department to ensure adequate training occurs. I mean, I have friends that are bus drivers. Let's get real, man. And in District 5, we've had more bus routes canceled or more bus stops changed. Just like Terry said earlier, I mean, I also have a mobility people here that used to go 1 block to the bus stop. Now they're going 7 to 8 blocks. What I would like to see is either, you know, more, they want to see more lit up bus stops. Bus stops also with recharging stations for mobility issues. And when they get on the bus, also have like a safe officer. They want to feel safer. But even my family that are bus drivers, District 5 at night, horrible place, man. Horrible place to be at a bus stop. Why? Because the majority of the bus stops are not lit. They're dark. I mean, for anyone, whether you're an elderly, disability, a young woman, a young lady with kids coming from the grocery store, these bus stops are not lit. It is horrible. It is bad. You don't get that in any other side of town except for District 5. So those are some of the issues that we need to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Yeah, so, you know, I know you asked about VIA and VIA Trans specifically, and I think they are relatively safe programs. I think we do have to make sure that as we just passed the State of Ascent sales tax, this proposition back in 2020, and when VIA starts to begin accessing those funds in the next, I think it's 3 years now, it was 4 years when well, I guess it would still be 4 years, that we ensure that part of that money, I mean, almost $43 million is that we make sure that that money goes towards accessing more frequent routes in the community here, that there's more bus stops. And the reason I say more bus stops is because in order to access VIA Trans, which has 5 ambulatory spaces on those VIA Trans units, you have to be within 2 miles, a 2-mile radius of a bus stop. So if they're limiting the amount of bus stops, that also limits the amount of wheelchair accessible patrons can use those buses. So we want to make sure that we're accessing those pieces. Now, in terms of when you said et cetera, I mean, I started immediately thinking of micromobility and of bicycles. It's not extremely safe to ride a bicycle here in District 5. It is not safe to ride one of the scooters or those types of things. And the same goes for the B-cycle, the bike sharing program. We don't have things like that in one of the oldest districts in the city because it's not safe. Those issues are not there. I mean, those issues are there. Those solutions have not been brought up yet. And it's wild to me to think that, because we have some of the biggest, widest alleyways. We have some wider streets than other cities. I mean, than other parts of the city. And we still are waiting for those types of things. We're still seeing bicyclists, cyclists dying on a daily basis, and or at least on a weekly basis. And that's just ridiculous to me. And there's a lot of folks that say, well, you don't have a lot of bike riders in District 5. And I think, no, we have entrepreneurs on bike. We have cyclists here. We have, folks who are just trying to stay active. And we talk about activity in the district, but we don't actually encourage that by having safe roads for cyclists and for others who are using micromobility. So, so accessing those dollars.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question before the session is over. So if we'd like to have any audience members would like to ask a question, could you please just let me know if you want to ask it by saying I do in the chat so I can call on you by name, and then we can open it up to the candidates. Okay, and while that's happening, I do have other questions. So if there are no questions from the audience, I'll go ahead and ask one of the ones that we have lined up. So the next question would be, what is important in a district representative to you? Ms. Castillo?
Yeah, I think accountability, transparency, and ethics, right? It's important that leadership within District 5 in particular has community in mind, whether it be having a connection here, because it's your community at stake, it's your history at stake of being displaced, or whatever the case may be. It's important that we're accountable to the communities we serve and not special interests. I believe it's important that community uplifts community, right? And I'm committed to ensuring that I appoint community folks to our boards and commissions because they're the ones who know best what District 5 has been asking for. I believe District 5 doesn't have time for leadership to learn as they go. We don't have time for a leader that says, I'm just now learning what the South Side wants, so like, give me a break. We need folks who are well seasoned in what District 5 residents have been demanding for decades, if not generations.
Thank you. And I do want to apologize to Mr. Yanez. I should have directed that question to you first, so I apologize. Mr. Yanez, would you please take the floor?
No problem, that's fine. Yes, I think part of being a leader or a council person is to have a basic understanding of the neighborhood. Do they know the district? I live on the south side, work on the west side. I think part of it is you have to have compassion, you have to have a history, you have to understand the problems that have gone on beyond 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You have to understand the transition of how the city has grown and the weaknesses of our district that has not developed the way it should have developed. I studied in Philadelphia. When you go and go to school in another state and city, you see the positive and the negatives. Then when you return home, you see the very super positives and super negatives of your area. Sometimes you have to have an expansive knowledge. That's very important. You have to understand where the possible solutions can come from, and then be able to work with all the partners and come where the best solution can come forth and get going. And it's not just that anyone with an education, it's also people that have the experience of the neighborhood, connect to all the community leaders to make sure everyone's involved, unite to solve a problem and then create the solution. So the best part of a leader is to listen and understand and then execute a problem. So that's what I wish to provide, leadership that listens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Crabb.
So I think it's very important to have someone who listens and recognizes everyone in the district. Part of what I've heard in talking to people is that, certain parts of the district feel very much left out of the conversation. They felt, and it's not a new thing. So I think someone who equally applies their attention across the board is very important. Compassion, experience in life, and I think we need to acknowledge that everyone in the district has different needs, and the very least that we could do is listen. And that should help us better understand how we can make decisions that's good for the whole district. And knowing the district is very important, and but that's half the battle. When you have ideas, the most important of having those ideas is knowing how to implement them. So I think that would additionally be very important as well.
Thank you. Mr. Garza?
Yes. first of all, the constituent is king. We service our constituents. As a government auditor, retired, I will find out what is available at the city from now the Biden administration. They're getting ready to do a multi-trillion infrastructure giveaway, and we're going to be there. And I'm going to take whatever District 5 is allotted and make sure that whoever needs it the most will get it, and we will fix it, our District 5, so that the people will be brought out of being institutionally neglected. We need safety, we need education, we need homes rehabilitated, we need affordable housing, and important of all is we need a bridge at Zarzamora and Frio City Road. People coming from the south side to work on the west side are stuck at the worst. So we will fix that. And the next thing is we will continue to pay attention to the constituents. All the ones that I talk to, they tell me, I call them, nobody answers. I call, they don't pay attention to me. They're out in meetings, they're out intertwining and saying that they're gonna do this, but when it comes down to it, nothing gets done. We're still having to build it. I will take action plus the dollars at City Hall and take it to my constituents and rehabilitate their houses, make them safe, and make small businesses develop along Guadalupe Street, which is the heart of District 5.
Thank you. Mr. Gress.
I mean, we need to acknowledge that District 5 is very diverse. I mean, 30 years ago was predominantly Hispanic. Now it's a really diverse community. As a city council representative, if elected, I mean, we need someone that's going to listen, recognize, and understand the needs of the district, well, from all facets. We have infrastructure issues, we have domestic violence issues, we have community investment issues, we have small business issues, but someone that can actually work with everyone here on this panel, from Ms. Crabb to Ms. Castillo, to Mr. Moreno, to Mr. Mata, to Mr. Garza, to Mr. Yanes, Landin. Great ideas come in the form of groups. I'm a business owner. My idea doesn't work. Maybe someone else's idea would work. And making the decisions that are going to benefit the district as the individual at the seat is what's going to move this district forward instead of backwards. This district has long been forgotten for too many years, decades. And it's time to have a representation on the board as a seat at the dais to make sure that the decisions are made in the benefit of the district. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad, but we need to keep moving the district forward. And this is the only way to do it, is to listen, recognize, and implement what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Absolutely. So I really think, folks are looking for a listener, they're looking for a learner, and they're looking for a doer. They're looking for someone who's going to be able to listen to those things that they have concerns over, to take the time to educate themselves and to learn about those pieces, and to be able to take ideas from an idea all the way to a policy. That's what it comes down to. I also think they need, alguien que habla inglés y español. You need someone who's actually going to be able to speak both languages that are majority spoken here in the district. And that's something that I think is going to be pivotal too, because there's so many folks who, are left out of conversations just basically due to language barriers. And I know that's not a disability, but it is most definitely a barrier in many cases. And we want to make sure we have someone who's going to be able to take that into account. So listener, learner, doer, and hopefully someone bilingual.
Thank you. Mr. Mata.
Yes, well, I think that, a lot of people in the district have lost hope in our district. I mean, we need to have someone that the constituents can trust, that we can inspire them, because right now, I think everybody on the panel there, everybody who's on this panel can agree that many people just don't trust the system anymore. They don't trust our district, either the council person or the staff. It's not, it's something that whoever gets in there is going to have to fix. So someone that they can trust, someone who has compassion, and someone who has passion. And at some point, someone who can just lead. I mean, it's good to listen to everyone and get ideas, but we need leadership in there. And whoever it is, I hope that they can inspire everyone to trust the district again. So I would say someone that the constituents can trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno.
Yes, ma'am. So in being able to have the experience of representing my Harlem community here within District 5 and having the privilege of being elected by them and having that 6 years of experience, I've learned that you have to assess, evaluate, and implement. And that takes a lot of effort. You're going to be able to absorb scrutiny when you're making the decision that's best for all people, not what's best for some. And that's something that even the media will tackle and throw at you as well. And that's something you have to be prepared for, because what your decision may not be the best with everybody else. I've never gone into a position based on making friends. My idea is to advocate for my community and do what's best and what's needed for all. And that's something that is really important, because if you go in there trying to make all these pretenses and all these promises, it's not going to come back and look good on you. To me, I go in there telling them, I'm going to advocate for you. I'm not going to promise you anything. I'm going to advocate for what's best for everyone. And that's the idea, and that's the premise of my ideology when it comes to leadership. In addition to that, you have to find ways to listen and make sure that you're tactical in the way that you approach and what you're doing for the best of the community and the greater good. My approach has always been that the true measure of a leader is someone who finds a situation and leaves it better than they found it in. And to me, I'm ready to take that baton from the previous generation and lead us forward into progress. And it is something that's important to me, because growing up on one part of the West Side and growing up on the South Side, I'm very acutely aware, and so are all my colleagues up here, are acutely aware of the differences. We all have various experiences on what shaped us to lead, but we've all had opportunities to do so. And I think with that, we're all ready to do so. And I feel with my educational background and working with a diverse group of people and implementing counseling, empathy, and other items, I think I'm ready, in addition with my elected official experience as well.
Thank you. We do have one audience question. We have about 2 minutes left. So if the candidates could keep that in mind when we're responding. Mr. Green, I believe you had a question.
The only question I have is that the East Side is definitely changing. I'm a product of that. For example, where I live right now, it used to be a meat factory. And if I spit really hard, it's a river walk. So what I'm wondering is, with urban reunification and the way it's going to look 5 years from now, how are you going to make sure that you're able to, the culture is able to benefit from all the things and changes that is going on around here? Because like I said, I'm an example of how everything's changing.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Crabb?
Well, I think with change, we need to look at how we protect our existing communities and culture, and take into consideration what they want out of the change. So making sure that the community that it's affecting is a very active part of the conversation is probably the most important thing. And then the second most important thing is ensuring that we're protecting those communities from changes that would adversely affect them. That's my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Garza.
Yes, District 5 is ready for a change. We need to move into the future. We've been stuck, but now we want to move into the future and get District 5 to where tourists come to see the historic district, the Mayan people that settled here. I grew up in the Alazan Apache Courts, and I have love for that area and compassion, and I will, in action, bring it to my constituents. Whatever we deserve from the city, we're gonna get, especially the ones that needs it the most. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have just a minute left, or yes. So excuse me. Sorry, I got a message that popped up. Mr. Gress, would you please
Yeah, respond. I mean, on that one, to keep the culture going, man. I mean, it's growing, it's prosperous. I mean, there's a lot of culture that has been forgotten in District 5. And in order to implement that, we do need to try to figure out a way on how to bridge that together. A lot of the old folks that do have the culture are, you know, sadly saying, passing away. We need to, we know, besides the murals that we have, besides the lost, you know, I'm a El Chato Association, so I'm the president of that, but there used to be right behind me an old drive-in called El Chato. Most people don't know about that. So a lot of the stuff that's being forgotten, we need to try to keep it together, man. I mean, and it's hard because a lot of the old.
We hope that you learned something today as